Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics on a spring break week. Leading in the second half of session, we're joined by possibly the most important senator going into the second half of session, Senator Scott Sifton here in St. Louis. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Scott. It's my pleasure.
So are you rested and ready to talk for 40 hours again?
Well, hopefully it won't come to that. We'll debate the issues as we need to, but hopefully there won't be the need for another almost 40-hour filibuster.
Tell the folks your opinion of what SJR 39 does.
Well, SJR 39 very simply legalizes discrimination in public accommodations against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered individuals. And you know, the United States Supreme Court has decided the issue of same-sex marriage, and I recognize that a lot of people disagree with it, but we would be sending the wrong message to the rest of the country about the kind of place Missouri is to allow discrimination in public accommodations against same-sex couples.
Are you a little surprised by some of the allies that have came out, major corporations in the state, the chambers of commerce, on your side in this?
I'm pleased. But that said, for all the same reasons I just mentioned, we understand what this means to the business community. We understand the importance of making sure that we send the message that Missouri is a welcoming place to everybody. We're in a global competition for talent. The Missouri Chamber of Commerce understands that. The regional chamber here in St. Louis understands that. A number of companies understand that. The NCAA understands that. It's just unfortunate that we have a majority in the Senate for the moment that appears not to, and hopefully the House will take a different approach.
If you're it's always been the baker, right, baking the cake. If you're a person who believes homosexuality to be wrong, and you have a bakery and you're baking cake for someone, do you believe that person should be forced to bake that cake in that hypothetical situation?
I don't know what you mean necessarily by forced, but the point is, and we've been through this in other areas, right? If you're a business and you're going to hold yourself open to the general public, you need to hold yourself open to the general public. You have a business license, you have the opportunity to do business with people who walk in your door, you know, we don't always get to pick and choose. And yeah, I understand that there are folks who have religious objections to same-sex marriage, and I respect that. But that doesn't mean that we can't find a way in the stream of commerce to accommodate what the law allows. The other important thing to remember about that is we already have in Missouri law very significant protections for clergy and religious organizations that have conscience-based objections to same-sex service. Mm-hmm. This was about commerce. And here's the thing that people need to know about SJR 39, and I made this point on the floor at some length. It is very broadly worded. There is an argument to be made that just about any company, if it is a little bit religious some of the time in some respect, just about any company can refuse services under SJR 39 in contexts that have nothing to do with weddings or wedding ceremonies or anniversaries or anything like that.
If the House were to take this and make it specific to the clergy, would you let that come to a vote?
I think that we frankly offered that at one point during the filibuster. That was a compromise that Democrats offered that, frankly, the Republican majority rejected.
So did you do that in good faith? If that would have been on, would you have let this come to a vote?
I think there's a good chance we would have found a way. I mean, now I'll tell you the pushback on that from the right was the point that I made a moment ago. There already are protections in the Missouri Constitution for clergy, and so the concern with doing that, and I think the reason our offer was rejected is because the concern was that, well, then this SJR really doesn't do anything. And
well, let's talk about, you've mentioned before in previous times about you have a personal connection, why you can identify with some of these issues maybe in a different way than other people in the Senate. Can you share with our viewers some of the personal impact that you can see?
No, absolutely. You know, my uncle and his partner have been together my entire life, and you know, and frankly, they're on the other side of the aisle from me. You know, when we go to visit Uncle Dave and Steve, Fox News is always on. But the thing of it is, though, you know, those two, because marriage has not been legal for most of the time they've been together, they can't claim the marriage deduction on their federal income taxes. They've probably paid more than $100,000 more in taxes over those 40 years that had they been married they wouldn't have had to. And that's just one example. In federal law, there's 700 plus benefits that are based on marital status. And until the Obergefell decision last summer, gay people simply couldn't have that opportunity. And I learned a little bit later in life that my father is also gay and lives with his partner in Roanoke, Virginia. So for me, this is it hits close to home. It is a personal investment that I have in equality for members of the LGBT community.
For the last year, you talked about running for Attorney General. You ultimately decided to stay in the Senate. Seeing you on the floor, holding the floor, making motions, moving the debate, is this one of the reasons why you decided to stay?
Well, to be very clear, the voters of the 1st District will get to decide whether I stay or not. And if you know the history of the 1st District, you'll know that that I don't take one vote for granted in the 1st Senate District.
But you chose to forego an Attorney General
right.
run to run again. Oh, I assume hoping you would succeed and be in the Senate.
Right, yeah.
It looked like on the floor this was a natural reason why you might have wanted to stay to fight for some of these issues.
If the voters of the 1st District are kind enough to send me back to Jefferson City, I do believe that that I can make a tremendous impact in the state Senate for the next 4 years. We only right now have 8 Democratic members. We only have perhaps as few as 2 attorneys who will be returning to the Senate in 2017, and I believe that between the fact that I do represent a competitive district, and I do therefore bring, I think, a balanced view to public policy that you may not get in all 34 seats.
Sure.
I think it's important to have that voice. I think it's important to have experience in the Senate as well. We get a lot of freshmen coming in every time, but it's a chamber where seniority really does matter, whether you're in the majority or the minority.
What else are you working on? I know we're talking about things you're trying to stop. What are you trying to pass?
We're trying to get a lot of good things done. You know, we have an issue with child support enforcement. There's been changes to how that's done nationally, and Missouri has moved toward those changes. But there's a trigger that depends on some international developments, actually. And we don't want to wait for that. We want to modernize Missouri's child support enforcement now. And my bill to do that is on the calendar. I'm also trying to get some things done for students with dyslexia. We've made some progress on that. We as a state do not do a particularly good job of either screening for, detecting, or providing remediation for students with dyslexia, and we know that we can and really should be doing a better job for them. Another piece of legislation that I'm hoping to move is for individuals with disabilities. We have folks that, because of their disability, need to have Medicaid services essentially just to be able to get out of bed in the morning. And once they can get that far, they're able to work in the workforce just like anybody else, except that the Medicaid guidelines we have in Missouri right now essentially sentence them to a life of poverty and provide a very strong disincentive for many individuals with disabilities to achieve their full potential. We want to change that.
Before we let you go, we'll get your take on the presidential primary. Are you a Clinton person?
I am all for Secretary Clinton. I think she has the right experience to do the job, more so than anybody else in the field, Democrat or Republican.
Squeaked out a win in Missouri. Wow.
Well, and I was very happy to be part of that when we had her in Afton. It was great to have her right in my backyard.
Lastly, the Republican side. What do you take of the Trump phenomenon?
You know, well, and there are a lot of voters who would say, if I can't have Bernie Sanders, I want Donald Trump. If I can't have Donald Trump, I want Bernie Sanders. Look, a lot of folks feel very much displaced by what has happened to the middle class in this country, and a lot of them are angry about it, and rightfully so. Really, in my lifetime, I mean, the first president that I really remember was Ronald Reagan, who did some great things, but part of his legacy has been, you know, we've seen changes to the middle class that have not been good. My own family was part of that. My father, who I mentioned before, lost his job when I was starting high school, and our family was wiped out in the late 1980s. So I've seen the impact that can have on families. I've felt it personally, and I understand that. At the same time, I think how we respond to that needs to be to focus on policy that allows us to compete in a global economy in the 21st century and looks forward instead of looking backwards to some of the ugliest periods in our history, which is what I'm afraid that Donald Trump would do.
Speed, looking forward. We hope to have you back as the campaign goes on and talk about it on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Wonderful. Scott, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
You bet. We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel, but first we'll leave you with this week's leading Missouri economic indicators.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics, our Opinion Maker panel, starting with old friend of the Missouri Times and This Week in Missouri Politics, Collin Reischman. Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
First time on. Very glad to have Jeffrey Mittman with the ACLU here in Missouri. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.
Mayor James Knowles from Ferguson. Very glad to have you on This Week in Missouri Politics. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And a person that's been on before, and we're glad to have back, Representative Paul Curtman. Want to start off with you. SJR 39. We heard Senator Sifton give his explanation of it. You're a leading proponent of this in the House. Give us your side.
Sure. Well, I think that America has a very strong tradition of protecting people's freedom. I don't believe that the First Amendment belongs just in the church or just in your home. I think that people in America should have the right to use the First Amendment, and even in their business. And I think that when it comes to people of religious faith, whether it's clergy or whether it's somebody of an artistic or creative business that might be asked to provide services to a gay wedding, I think that people should have a right to not be forced by the government to condone or otherwise facilitate an act that violates their own religious beliefs. So I think that this is an important bill for the protection of our religious liberties.
A couple points that have been brought up in opposition are, one, this has not actually happened in Missouri. So putting something in the Constitution seems an extreme step for something that's never happened yet. And two, a lot of your normal allies are not with you on this. The business groups and stuff are opposed to this. How do you answer those 2 points?
Well, first of all, as far as there not being an issue of this happening in Missouri, we have seen this happen in other states. Some people like to throw out this, well, it's just a solution in search of a problem. But I mean, isn't that what we call it when we put gas in our car tank, right? So as we see that needle approaching empty, we immediately think to ourselves, it's time to go put gas in the car. Well, when you look across America, that needle is quickly approaching empty in the minds of a lot of people of religious faith when we see that our religious liberties are under attack in other states. And so the whole idea behind putting this in the Missouri Constitution is to make sure that it does not become an issue in our state like it has in other states. And as far as some people that aren't with us, people are entitled to their own opinion. I know that there's certain business groups that are against this proposal, and I think it's really easy sometimes for people in business to be caught in the political correctness trap because, profits and making money is very important. I mean, that's the whole point of business.
Sure.
But at the same time, we have to understand that we can't even have an economy unless we have freedom. And this is a fundamental aspect of freedom is the protection of our First Amendment rights.
Judge Mittman, it's not strange, bedfellows. We were talking about during the break the different sides you've been on, but give us your take on this and what are you doing to oppose this or if it goes to a ballot?
Yeah, and again, we agree. The First Amendment is absolutely important. I think the ACLU earned our stripes in ensuring there was robust free speech, religious freedom protections. So for instance, if the government ever tried to tell any pastor, any clergy member, you must perform this sort of marriage, we would be the first in line to defend that religious freedom. What we're talking about is the marketplace, where we as Americans come together. We come together as black people, as white people, immigrants and native, as Muslims and Jews. In the marketplace, where we go to restaurants, where we go to bakeries, where we go to florists, we all say we are Americans here. We put aside our differences to say our American system treats all of us equally. And that's the rule that everybody wants, to write into the Constitution that we want to have discrimination, that we want to start to divide. It's bad for business, it's bad for Missouri, and the people just don't want it.
Collin Reischman, I know you're never short for opinions. If this gets amended just to clergy, does this go to the ballot? And I assume it passes, right?
Unfortunately, I do think it probably does pass. I mean, UFCW has a pretty long history of supporting equality, and we negotiate LGBT protections into our contracts whenever we can. We take part in the Pride Parade. Our basic philosophy is if you go to work and you work hard, you should be treated the same as the guy standing next to you. But unfortunately, I think the state has shown that if this goes to the ballot, then I think that we'll see a lot of push from, particularly on the right side, saying that this is about protecting freedom as opposed to maybe getting away from that principle of equality.
Mayor Knowles, it is tough here because in one side, I think most people would say you shouldn't have to provide services to someone you don't want to provide services to, right? And most people don't want to be provided services by people that don't want to provide them, correct? But in this case, you do have there's an equality issue. It seems to be competing moral views of the world.
And I think it depends on whether or not you're telling someone that they have to participate in something that they fundamentally, as part of their religion, do not believe in, or if you're talking about just serving someone. If you're talking about somebody going into, your grocery store and handing them a banana and say, I won't serve you because, you're homosexual and I don't believe in that. Or you're asking someone to participate, and I think the clergy issue was brought up. Are you gonna force clergy members to participate in a wedding when they and their religion does not believe in that? So I think there is some concern, as Representative brought up, that it is an issue in other states, but it is a very delicate issue that we have to look at. The city of Ferguson actually was one of the first communities in St. Louis to actually add LGBT protections to our human rights legislation in our city council. But at the same time, you have to weigh both the religious freedom aspect of this and obviously the freedom of others to participate in the economy.
There'll be people that are surprised to find the mayor of Ferguson's a conservative, right?
Yeah,
maybe not
anymore. Most of the world knows at this point.
But my point would be that we talk about these issues, the politics of this, LGBT discrimination issues, just the whole issue of being gay seems to be an issue that is, as you're younger, you just don't care. You're a mayor in a spot where you can't be a right-wing person. Do you find that the conservatives that elected you and your constituents, do they even care anymore who's gay?
We have actually a significant LGBT community in Ferguson. We've had a number of people move in over the past several years. It's really not an issue in local politics. You move into a community where you feel comfortable. Our community, we do try to be welcoming to people of all backgrounds and all persuasions. But at the same time, people can vote with their feet, right? I'm going to go to a community that I feel welcome in, or I'm not going to go to a community or not going to go to a place that I don't feel welcome in.
But Representative Curtman, does that apply to a political party too? It probably is true that every day someone registers to vote that doesn't care who's gay. And some older person that grew up in a different era passes away that does. Is this the right politics for the Republican Party going forward?
It absolutely is. I think that anybody who sides on the First Amendment is in the right politics, regardless of what party they're in. If somebody chooses to say no because they believe that holding out their goods or services is going to, let me put it this way: if you're asked to participate in a wedding, your business, whether or not you believe it facilitates and condones that act or not, people should have the right, if their sincerely held religious beliefs would tell them that they shouldn't participate. And I think that there are a lot of people on different sides of this issue. And of course, no one's, the bill isn't a bill to discriminate against LGBT. And I think that you need to be very clear here.
It is meant to protect people,
I think we need to be very clear here. If you're saying that people of faith are not allowed to exercise or practice their faith, even as far as their own private business goes, then we're clearly discriminating against people of faith.
Mr. Mittman, what if a business owner came to you and asked you to protect them?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we want to be clear. Currently in the state of Missouri, unfortunately, in any restaurant except for the cities that rule otherwise, a gay couple could go in and the restaurant owner has the right under Missouri law to say, we do not serve gay people here. That's unfortunate, but that's the state of the law. To now go a step further and write discrimination into our Constitution, and let's be clear, this is about discrimination. It singles out gay people, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people. It singles them out and says, our Constitution tells you as Missourians, you don't have rights here. That's all it does.
Collin, the politics of this, though, over time, it seems to me like there's one that these type of laws will not be looked at favorably 20 years from now.
That would be my guess. The more and more young people I meet who are around my age in their 20s, who, Republican or not, for the most part will tell you, yeah, I don't really care much about gay people.
It's an interesting thing. You have the political establishment, and then over time, it's hard to, obviously I think you're right about the First Amendment going forward, but the establishment's always a tricky thing, where it goes. I had my own tangle with the establishment this week. We have in the media, you talk about establishments, my God, it's always sad when the elderly get kind of bitter and angry, and it makes it for a more challenging thing. You almost feel sorry for them. But I think over time, you're seeing changes in every industry, and maybe the changes in this will make some of these laws where we don't need them anymore.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible.
If I may, Scott, the bill does not say that people can say no to somebody just because they're gay. The bill says it only relates to religious ceremonies or the wedding reception. That's actually very clear in the bill. So somebody can say no, according to our Constitution, if this passes, only if they're asked to participate, their business or services, in a wedding or a wedding reception. That's very clear in the bill.
So speaking of another point, the Department of Justice in the city of Ferguson, everyone that's involved in municipal politics, give us what happened with that. You had a long negotiation. It finalized up. Give us the very short version of what happened.
So we had a very long negotiation. We had a proposal came forward out of those negotiations that our staff and the council still believed needed some additional tweaking. We had made those amendments, so to speak, on the floor, passed the decree. The Department of Justice didn't like those amendments. We were sued. We went back, had some further conversations with the Department of Justice. They provided us in writing some clarifications to some serious cost considerations that we had, and the city decided that it was most prudent to go ahead and move forward with the agreement as it was presented, knowing that we have in writing those cost considerations addressed. And so now the community is looking to move forward, address these issues of reform that are in the consent decree, many of which we've already done, but we're looking to put this behind us.
Jerry Mittman, you know a little about setting up to the federal government. Where it sits now, do you believe that Missouri is on the right track as a state to dealing with municipal reforms?
I think we have to go back to why was the DOJ in Ferguson, and we have to remember the only reason the DOJ was there is because there was a study done, there was investigation, and what was found, and it's troubling, but it was found that Ferguson was policing in an unconstitutional manner. And there are many places in Missouri, many places across the country that have that issue. So we've got to address that fundamental stance, which is there is unconstitutional policing going on. We have to fix it. There are good ways of doing that. We can work cooperatively with the police departments. We can come up with fixes. We can have post-training that understands there is bias. But where there's resistance to change, that's when the government comes in. If the government's doing it the right way, if they're trying to address unconstitutional factors, we will be with them. If the government is trying to act unconstitutionally, we will fight them. In this case, though, the people in Ferguson were having their rights violated on a daily basis.
Representative Curtman, it seems like sometimes the protesters here would have a lot in common with your view of the world. to reform government, to make it where cities don't profit off their citizens. There's legislation now to talk about some of these grass tickets, some of these code ordinances. Does that pass the House?
I think it does pass the House. And I think that my personal opinion is that the role of government, we were talking about this in the room just outside, is that the role of government is to help keep people free. But I do think that we need to be careful with the Department of Justice passing down mandates to specific municipalities. I mean, if it's really an issue, we got to make sure that it's something that's codified in law across the board, because one of the fundamental tenets of liberty is making sure that we have equality under the law. So telling just Ferguson that here's an agreement just for you, I don't think is the correct response or the way to go.
Collin, it looks like the state's trying to improve itself. Some of these communities are trying to improve itself. We all talk about municipal judges now, but there are some municipal judges that were trying to reform the system previously. Did the federal government risk overreach here?
I think you're always going to get a backlash when a judge or when an entity that doesn't come from Missouri comes into a community in Missouri and says, hey, this is what you have to do. Even if they're completely right, I think there's always a natural pushback of, look, this is our community, we know what's best for ourselves. So yeah, you certainly risk the backlash, but at the same time, there's a huge spotlight on, unfortunately, communities like Ferguson to say, here's the problem you supposedly have, demonstrate that you're changing it.
Speaking of spotlights, Donald Trump inched closer to the Republican nomination this week. Does he get there? Does he get the delegates he needs to win it at the convention?
I think he's on track to do it, and I have to say, just for the record, I sympathize a little bit with my Republican friends because I think they're being asked to make a tough choice between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, and I don't think that's the choice many of them wanted to make going into this, and I think that's unfortunate that they're going to have to make that choice.
Paul Curtman, you might have more grassroots connections than anybody in this state. If Donald Trump won the Republican primary, if for somehow the Republican delegation doesn't go with him as they're supposed to, will the grassroots people be up in arms?
Yeah, I think so. I think that one of the reasons that we've had kind of this grassroots awakening over the last several years is because people see establishment politics as kind of running roughshod over what the people want. And I think even here there's a lot of people who don't support Donald Trump, but they would rather support Donald Trump than let the party tell them who they can and can't support.
Mayor Knowles, I mean, it's a complex thing. Do you think Donald Trump gets to the threshold he needs to win it on the first ballot?
I don't know that he gets there on the first ballot. And, you know, I was the first congressional caucus chair for the Republican Party in 2012. I can tell you that, and we had it was quite an ordeal between the Santorum, the Paul folks, and the Romney folks to get people to the convention. I think it's going to be an ugly fight at the convention. I was a delegate in 2008. Probably hope to be a delegate this year. I'm not sure what's going to happen on that floor, but I don't see Donald Trump getting there on the first ballot.
Do you think he gets on the first ballot? Is it one of these old-time smoky backfield room conventions?
Of course, the ACLU, we don't take ever positions on elected officials. One thing we are watching, though, is the concern for us is the language that is being used. When you have a national figure targeting members of the American public, Mexicans or Muslims, that to us is very concerning. And we are hoping that more and more people will come out and say, you can propose any policy you want, you can be right, left, center, but when you start attacking Muslims, when you start to get your protesters riled up to target African Americans, when you threaten Mexicans, that's a problem.
Wouldn't you protect Donald Trump's right to have an event and not have it ended by protesters?
So he has a right to have a public event. He has a right to have a private event where he can say who can come in, who come in. What he can't do is target African American or Muslims for exclusion based on their appearance or their religious beliefs.
I have a feeling that if he does get to that first ballot, this is a debate that will go on all throughout the year. We hope to have all of you guys back here on This Week in Missouri Politics. Until next week, we'll see you right back same time on This Week in Missouri Politics.